Good morning, RWorld, and welcome back to another episode of RWorld Talk. We have Nate Parsons with us this morning. Good morning, Nate.
Hi, Chris. Good morning.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm fantastic. So, Nate, you are our Vice President of Advocacy and Legislative Strategy. You're also our Government Affairs Director for Broward County. You started out up in St. Lucie County, but even before that, you were working with Florida Realtors.
Correct.
Okay. So our government affairs team services Broward, Palm Beach, and St. Lucie County. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you specifically cover in Broward County? Maybe give us a little bit of an overview.
Sure. Well, Chris, being a government affairs director for the association, it's our job to represent the association, represent the members, and kind of give the industry a voice. So in Broward County, as you know, we have a lot of municipalities, we have a lot of activity, so it's kind of my job to stay on top of the policy happenings that are going on, keep the members and leadership abreast of just different ordinances that are coming up, and when applicable, take a position to represent kind of the ideals and positions of our industry. So. Okay. In Broward, as is the case in most of our areas, public policy often focuses on taxation, private property rights, zoning, and things of that nature. Essentially anything that has to do with what you all do in business every day. The government affairs team is on the advocacy and public policy side of those conversations.
Okay. And you're always keeping an eye on vacation rental ordinances and yes. Rent control issues and things like that as they pop up?
Correct. Yep. That's something that we see frequently. That's something that we love discussing with our elected officials, and they love talking about it with us. It's something that I love so much that I did my master's thesis on. So,
okay.
But yes, that's something that comes up frequently, but times are changing, and the positions of the association adapts with the times. So that's something that you see frequently in advocacy, and something we'll probably touch on in a little bit.
So where'd you go to school?
I went to Florida State for my bachelor's and for my master's, and I'm currently back in school for a law degree.
Okay, wonderful. I'm sure we have a bunch of our members that were just yelling at their radios, "Go Knowles," and yes. You got the other half that are probably cursing your name right now.
Right.
So why don't we talk a little bit more about advocacy? What is the value of advocacy for realtors, and how do you leverage relationships with our community partners, which you do a fantastic job at? I've sat in through city commission meetings where we actually had private closed-door meetings with the commissioners to talk about ordinances that they were about to hear at first reading, second reading, whatever the case may be. And they really value our input. And you do such an incredible, eloquent job in really portraying what it is that the realtors stand for in those issues. But why don't you tell us about how you leverage those relationships?
Certainly. Advocacy is very unique. It's a lot about having the resources and the tools, which the association does, but having the knowledge and leveraging your relationships. So you mentioned, being in those meetings and interacting with our elected officials. In my mind, our role and my role is to just be a resource to those elected officials. A lot of people think advocacy or lobbying is adversarial, and I think it's the contrary. I think Absolutely. We are there to be a tool. We are there to offer an alternative. When we go and meet with commissions or elected officials about something that we might take a position on, it's not because we're against something or we're fighting for a particular reason. It's because we think that there could be a better way to go about things.
Sure.
We always like to say realtors are the stewards of our community, and that's what I like to emphasize to our elected officials. And with that, realtors carry a very unique perspective on specific issues, and they're typically very plugged into the community. So what I love about my job and what I love about advocacy is you guys come to me and educate me on what's going on in the industry, what's going on in your business, and then I'm able to use my skill set and knowledge and resources and research and talk to these elected officials and say, hey, Chris told me about this issue that just popped up. Here's why it's an issue. Here's what we can do about it. And it's a conversation. It's not, the Realtors Association trying to convince the elected officials to do something. It's us saying, we have a shared problem. Let's work together. Here's how we think the best way to go about it is.
Yeah, and we mentioned community partners. We really do have partnerships with the cities because you see something that maybe the city manager and the city attorney had drafted up some sort of an ordinance, and then they present it to the city commission. We get notified. We don't get notified, but you always have your ear to the ground, and you know exactly what is about to come up at that commission meeting. And then we have an opportunity to say, hey guys, this is what you are about to put into place. This is how it's really going to affect the homeowners and your constituents. And the realtor perspective being a little bit different than the city commission's perspective, we have the opportunity to sit down with them and just sort of massage that ordinance a little bit to make it more effective, help them realize the goal that they're trying to achieve, but do it in a way that it's not going to be harmful to the homeowners or the realtor community as well. So, and you do a fantastic job with it, because I've been privy to some of those emails when they go back and forth, and we may sit down and the conversation that we're having may sound contentious at times, but then we end up leaving that meeting, and then you get this beautiful thank you email from the city manager saying, we never realized that this is what the potential outcome could have been. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. So it's not, you're right, it's not something adversarial. We're really working together towards a common goal.
Exactly.
So sometimes we need to remember that obviously change doesn't happen overnight. Sometimes we go through several of these meetings. But can you talk about the cycle of advocacy, explain sort of more of that process that we were just talking about?
Sure. Well, that's a very important question, because everybody thinks that, if an issue arises, it should be dealt with immediately. We might see something in the news or see something on social media and say, holy cow, this is a big problem. What are we doing about this? That's not really how politics works.
No,
I mean,
it's slow.
It's slow. It's interesting. Sometimes it doesn't make sense. But what you need to think about is, the aims of policy, first of all. Why are we attempting this? Why is the city commission or the legislative body bringing this up? And why might we have a different position? And then it's all about communication. So
let's stop right there, because why is it happening? Sometimes it could be that there's a neighbor who's been a squeaky wheel and they need to do something about it because they've got a bunch of their neighbors together to go and sort of lobby the commission themselves. Or then other times it could be like a policy change that happens on a state or national level that forces that local municipality to change something that's on their books.
Exactly. I mean, policy happens in a myriad of ways. As you mentioned, sometimes it can just be a very loud group, small group. But that's also one of the amazing things about government and representative government.
For the people.
You're able to have those conversations. You're able to communicate. For those of you who have never been to a city commission meeting or any sort of legislative meeting, please go. They are informative. They are intriguing. They are better than any reality TV you'll ever see.
Sometimes they get contentious among the people on the dais too.
Yes. But it's so important to be a part of the conversation. And that's something that we talk about frequently. It's probably the largest goal of Realtor Association advocacy, is having a seat at the table and making sure our voice is heard. And I'm happy to be able to facilitate that, but I couldn't do it without the members either. So the cycle of advocacy sometimes takes a little longer than we would like, but it's because you're fully baking all of the ideas. You're working together with the elected officials. You're hearing other stakeholder perspectives. You're really going through what the unintended consequences of policy could be. And that's why we like to offer resources and say, hey, city XYZ, we've seen this before in a similar situated municipality. This is what happened. Let us help you, prevent yourselves from making that same mistake.
Right.
And that's where we can really be a resource. And I think the elected officials are appreciative of that, because, that's an amazing role of the Realtors Association and other community groups and non-governmental organizations, is to give that insight in our area of expertise.
Right. Yeah, nobody likes to push anything through too fast, and then you end up with a broken bill, and that's not doing its intended purpose,
Right.
and everybody's waiting for the glitch bill to be filed, sort of thing.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's talk about policy on local and state level. So what are some recent policies that were created or enacted that really benefited the realtor profession?
Sure. Well, there's a million things to think about. Just as often as wins come up, there's more policy. It's a frequent cycle, but a lot of our focuses again are on taxation, or on zoning, or on private property rights. So locally, we've been doing a lot of work on short-term and vacation rentals, and that's always been a very in-depth topic, because on the one hand, we want to make sure that property owners are able to use their property as desired, as intended,
Right.
to its highest and best use.
Yeah, we're big on private property rights.
Big on private property rights, but also we see the other side where, neighbors, deserve the right of quiet enjoyment. So a lot of times our stance is education and working together with these groups. What is fair? How is enforcement going to be carried out?
Right.
What's understandable?
And what is maybe the cost to the consumer or the resident?
Exactly. Something that we might touch on is what might seem like a win to us may not seem like a win to the layperson, but that doesn't mean it's no less a win. Like
Right.
sometimes a win for us is changing a sentence in an ordinance.
We'll take the small wins all day long.
But by changing that sentence, it goes from the realtor members having a lot of liability if something is violated to, the realtor's a professional, they've done their job, this is who the onus is on, and
Right.
that's a win. But a lot of times, we're just making sure that everybody's opinion is heard, and just trying to do what's best for the community. A lot of environmental, transportation, affordable housing is a huge thing going on right now. So just working with the municipalities on grants and resources.
And the governor wants full funding of Sadowski, but that doesn't always happen. The governor can want all he wants, but then the legislature gets together and says, well, wait a minute, we need to pull some money out of here for other things.
Yes, they love to do so. They've been really great about it lately, and we appreciate that. Housing is so affordable, and that, we know that, but it's really the lifeblood of our state. Everything hinges on housing. How can you have tourism or agriculture or any other industry if you don't have housing? So, that needs to be a primary focus, along with insurance. I won't touch that topic too much, but it's good to see them starting to put some emphasis on that.
Right. You had just said housing's so affordable. I think you meant to say so unaffordable.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's crazy what's been happening in the last few years. We already had a housing market that was already severely cost burdened, but now certainly with the amount of people that are moving into the state of Florida, it just keeps getting worse and worse, and prices just keep going up. So that's something that they definitely need to put some serious work into. Not only the state government, but also local municipalities to stop with the NIMBYism and allow some affordable housing projects to happen right in their backyards. Part of your job, we were just talking about private property rights, is helping us uphold private property rights for realtors and for consumers. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your strategy for vacation rentals, specifically in Fort Lauderdale? That's something that we've been dealing with for quite a number of years. And now it seems like many municipalities, especially in Broward County, are starting to enact various ordinances that restrict or severely limit your ability to operate your property as a vacation rental. So what sort of moves have been made in Broward County and specifically Fort Lauderdale recently?
Yeah, that's a great question, Chris. As previously mentioned, vacation rentals, short-term rentals, it's a hot button issue. Right. The elected officials and the municipalities of the League of Cities, they get a little incensed about home rule, understandably so. I think there's always a balance to be struck, and that's something that we've talked about earlier. There's a way to do it right that is fair to the property owner, that's fair to their neighbors. And that's typically what we look for when we're going through these policy discussions. It goes back to intention. Why are we adding in these additional provisions? Why is the fine this number? Why is this going to be enforced this way?
Right.
So typically our strategy is to first go through the proposal. What is, the rationale behind this? How can this be interpreted? Is this clear for the property owner to understand? I have a really fun habit. My government affairs committee is probably rolling their eyes right now. Every time one of these ordinances come out, and they're typically, 20 or 30 pages long, I go by line and annotate it and write everything I have thoughts on. And then I bring it to them and then we go line by line. And then we type up talking points, send it to the city, and then meet with them and go line by line. So oftentimes, each time we go over an ordinance, there are, 2 or 3 multiple hour meetings. But it's all about striking that compromise. How can it be fair to everyone? And also, is this a stance worth taking? It might be a little direct to say that, but, specifically in Fort Lauderdale, you and I recently dealt with that. If it's something the community wants, if it's something that the property owners are behind, if it makes sense, that's something that would make sense for the Realtors Association to get behind.
Of course.
We're staunch private property rights.
Sometimes we just have to stand down.
Right. And we're staunch private property rights advocates, but we're also for, the self-policing. And what we don't want is any unfair imposition on the property owners. But if everybody can agree and it makes sense and enforcement is understood, that's where the best of policy really happens. Where things are forced on people is where we say, wait a minute, realtors want what's best for the community, but we also want to make sure, Granny over here who needs supplemental income isn't being, suppressed by unintended consequences of policy. So.
And we also like safe, vibrant communities. And sometimes people think, oh, the realtors, they just want to be able to sell these properties as Airbnbs and yada, yada. But that's not where we're coming from.
Right.
Sometimes if there's something that needs to be enacted that's going to make the community a better place to live, we'd be all behind it. Mm-hmm. We just don't want the government to over-infringe on those private property rights and allow people to do what it is that they want to do with the properties that they own.
Exactly. I mean, sometimes we even suggest harsher not to say overly harsh, but, we're not always saying go more lenient, this goes too far.
Right.
Again, we're trying to arrive at the best policy position for everyone. So we have talked with municipalities and said, hey, if you're having an issue with parking or noise or trash, increase those ordinances.
Right.
If you're having, troublemakers where law enforcement needs to be utilized more than they should, here's an example of a trespass document that you can start implementing with property owners. There are methods to go through that penalize the bad actors while making sure that the people who are trying to do it right aren't unfairly burdened.
Right. Yeah, we always like that happy medium.
Yes.
So let's talk about elections, because that is a major part of your job. We're now in 2024. Big time election year. I know you still need to get all the details about candidates and the upcoming races and whatnot. But bring us up to speed on our candidate screening process. What do we look for in candidates, and why is it really important for members to understand that?
Yes. Of course, candidate screening is so vitally important. We talked about relationships earlier, and the relationships really start with candidate screening.
Absolutely.
You've participated in candidate screening. A lot of our members and our leadership have participated. But it's really having those one-on-ones, those conversations with the candidates, with the elected officials, having that touch point with incumbents and saying, what's your vision? How can we help? What are things that you want to tackle? It goes back to that approach I mentioned earlier of, how can we work together in this? Use your platform or your expertise along with our resources and our network to achieve what's best for the community. So when we look at candidate screening, oftentimes we want to make sure that the candidate or the incumbent is in touch with what's going on in their community.
Right.
You have to be plugged in. You have to face the hard truths sometimes. And, realtors are out in the community, so they typically know what's going on.
Right.
We like to expect our members to be engaged citizens, and I think it's fair to expect the same of elected officials.
Absolutely.
Having a plan, having, good fiscal responsibility. A big thing is being willing to ask for help, understanding where, a candidate's knowledge might not be, fully complete on a topic, and saying, hey, this is a topic of importance to the real estate industry. Would you guys mind, weighing in whenever something like this comes up? It's not to say that they have to agree with us. That's a common misconception. Just because, we screen someone or we may endorse someone, that is not, carte blanche. It's not, scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. There's no quid pro quo. Like, it couldn't be further from that. It's, are you somebody who cares deeply about your community? Do you have the passion and perhaps the background to get the things done?
Right. And do you have an open mind? Are you willing to work with us so that we can help you do your job better? And
you don't have to agree with us, as I mentioned.
Right. They don't always agree with us.
Well, you listen to us and you can say thank you for your position, but I disagree. That's truthfully one of my favorite things, because you can work with someone who respects you but doesn't agree with you, but somebody who won't hear you out at all. And we have had some elected officials.
Yeah.
It was always my way or the highway.
And they still came to screen with us.
Yes.
Yeah. Those are always really fun ones. Like,
right.
Wow, this is crazy. I can't believe you think that we would endorse you.
Exactly. Yeah.
And sometimes we do endorse them, even though they adamantly disagree, but we'll have that conversation the same way that we do in the boardroom. And we've got differing opinions, but at the end, hopefully everybody walks out of that meeting at least with a better understanding of what the other person's position is. And sometimes we could just use that information in order to know how best to communicate with that person.
Right.
Okay. Well, you are certainly a very busy guy. Is there anything for the greater good that you wanted to add? Any questions that I didn't ask, that information that you want to throw at us?
I would just, reiterate the fact that any person should be an engaged citizen, but specifically our membership. Join committees, go to the city council or city commission meetings. If you've never been to Great American Realtor Days in Tallahassee, take part in that. Advocacy is so important because it's having that seat at the table. It's making sure your voice is heard. Do your research. Be a political junkie. Ask questions. Be inquisitive. But also understand that change doesn't happen overnight. Right. But it also doesn't happen without engaged, passionate individuals. And when all else fails, your government affairs staff is here to help, here to educate, here to give advice and, advocate on your behalf. So I just love what I do. I love being able to, speak on behalf of the realtors. And I couldn't do my professional advocacy without the members' volunteer advocacy. So it's really a partnership.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I've got one last question for you. We ask it of every guest that's on the show. Tell us about a little Florida gem, something that you absolutely love about where you live.
Ooh, That's a really tough question. It reminds me of the question we ask at our mayor's breakfast of the speed dating for the mayors. I would have to say my mind immediately goes to the breakers. I mean, I know that's a very specific answer, a bougie answer, dare I say, but if you have not been to Breakers Brunch, it's amazing.
It is amazing.
They're amazing. It's just so picturesque, and it really embodies, South Florida and Palm Beach, and it's just gorgeous. It's everything you think of with Florida. So every time I get to go there, either for work or for personal reasons, it's always a great time.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, that's definitely a Florida icon.
Yes.
Breakers has been around for a very long time. I've been lucky enough to go there a few times, and it definitely never disappoints. Well, thank you very much for being with us today. Thank you for all that you do for our members. And to you all out there, we will see you right back here next time on Our World Talk.